Welcome to the first webinar for the Future of Business, an intercompany course for changemakers. My name is Mark Carr, and I am the course facilitator based in Washington, D.C. And we are pleased to have John Mark Guinée join us as a guest speaker who is based in Paris, France. John Mark is the partner and co-director of Archipel & Co. And Archipel & Co. helps companies to develop innovative and inclusive economic models in more than 40 countries. John Mark is also the founder of GoodPoint, our startup that fosters communities of micro entrepreneurs in emerging economies to participate in the value chains of large companies. As a social entrepreneur, John Mark led the inclusive business approach of Bell Group, a multinational cheese marketer based in France. The initiative, Sharing Cities, was an innovative distributive model involving more than 10,000 street vendors in Asia and Africa and lasted for 4 years. Previously, John Mark served as the executive director of Ashoka France and developed a track record for launching social enterprises in Cambodia and China. Passionate about connecting the business and social sectors, John Mark is a telecommunications engineer and a graduate of HEC, where he currently teaches. He also serves as a director of several foundations, NGOs, and impact investing funds. So welcome, John Mark. And just a quick note to the audience, you can earn an extra 5 points for watching the webinar by answering the questions below in the quiz that's located right at the bottom of the webinar video. So without further ado, I would like to welcome John Mark again. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on this call. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Mark, for inviting me. Very happy to be here.
No, we're happy to have you, John Mark. It's definitely a pleasure. We're really confident that what you'll share with our audience today will really help them understand in a very practical way how to create impact, whether as a social entrepreneur or entrepreneur. So first, I would just like for you to introduce yourself and share with us your professional journey as a social entrepreneur and entrepreneur. And as you share your story, please also share with us some of the values that drive you to do the work that you do.
Thank you, Mark. And it's going to be difficult because you already said a lot of things about my journey, and I try to not going too much into details, but trying to articulate this journey the best I can. So I'm 40 years old. I'm married. I have one daughter, beautiful, and it's been 20 years that I've started my journey. I say my professional journey. And if I try to explain actually what is the common thread between the different things that I've done as an entrepreneur, as a social entrepreneur, as a consultant, or as a supporter, or everything that I can do, I would say that probably the best name of what I do is change making. I really try, and this is my passion in everything that I've done in many different contexts and geographies, is always to and this is my obsession, how you create models and business models, to be clearer, how you create business models that can really create a bridge that will allow vulnerable population and specifically farmers and livestock farmers. This is really what I'm passionate in, and informal actors, to actually take the bridge of modernity, embrace modernity, empower themselves so that they can be fully part of the economy of the society. And this is really what I try to do from day one. Actually, I started as an NGO founder. I started when I was 19, and with really this idea than already this idea than it was already important for me to do something that would have some impact on people, and I felt that I had the capacity to really bring some intelligence and some goodwill and some energy to try to resolve some social issue. I started by installing solar panel in many different countries in Africa, and with a very philanthropic model, to be frank. And this is where I realized by going very often on the field that and seeing that finally, after all the effort that were brought, very often actually the projects were abandoned, or the installation did not work, and it was really something that twisted me. And I realized that probably the reason why it did not work, and it's really a kind of foundation in what I've done after, was that there was no incentive system for people just to clean into the house and clean the solar panel to make it work. So it worked a little bit on goodwill from people or collective commitment to do something for a few months, and after nobody is able anymore to do it because nobody is paid for that, nobody is incentivized. And very early in my career, I found very interesting to see how we could develop models that create this system of incentives. I started to do that in Cambodia, where I stayed during 3 years, where I actually led, and it was my first job after being graduate from telecommunications. I decided to do something completely different and working in agribusiness. This is where I discovered this field of this whole sector, which really passionate me. My first job was to be the CEO of a leading company in the sugar pantry sector, the world leader actually. So at 25, the world leader because sugar pantry, it's an endemic trees. You only have them in Cambodia, and you have only one company, which makes you, by definition, a world leader. But actually, I was alone in my market. But it was a company that 60 people. That was my first job, and it was amazing to see how we were able collectively to, to move with a lot of decisions to be able to succeed. And we've created the first organic certified company of the country, the first one to export products out of Cambodia, and it was a great success. And then it moved on to my next move, where I met some people, and I became, during 2 years in India, in north of India, an advisor for the Noble Inca Institute, which is basically an institute where you have 400 artisans, Tibetan artisans, who followed His Holiness the Dalai Lama during the 60s, the 70s, 80s, train the best artisan who train youngest and youngest. And now you have this organization that needed some help to structure. So during 2 years, I structured this organization, helped to structure this organization. Amazing experience that brought me to the next one. It's really a question of meeting people who trust you, basically. And I had the chance to meet with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, who literally sent me and my partner at this time at 4,000-meter altitude on the Tibetan plateau, where I created, as a social entrepreneur, during 4 years, the first yak holding, which is actually the only yak holding in the world, and the highest French-owned company in the world, 4,000-meter altitude, which is this ambition to really find solutions to better integrate Tibetan nomads who are yak herders, who are livestock farmers, to the economy, where we developed a whole yak wool industry, where we developed a yak milk factory. And we created in 4 years, or it's still existing and it's moving very well, but more than 1,000 jobs from zero in 4 years. It was a great experience. And after 4 years, beautiful, I was very tired. And my wife said, okay, you have, she was in Cambodia with me, but she did not follow me in China. She said, you have 4 years So 4 years minus 1 hour, I moved back to France, and I let the organization continue to grow, still existing and even working much better than when I was leading it. It's kind of it's the one thing that I see very often in my life. It's better. It's working better when I'm not in it anymore. I think I'm a good creator, but not a very good person to scale it, to bring it at scale. And then this is where I actually started my social entrepreneur venture, because when I was in Asia, in all the cities where I lived during 8 years, I always had the street vendors coming to my house selling fruit and vegetables, and I always asked myself, how come these street vendors that I know, that I like, she only sell me very basic products. She couldn't sell me any brands. And I was very surprised to see that brands were not that interested into the largest distribution network in the world. There are much more street vendors than shops in emerging markets. And again, I met with the Bell family, the shareholding families of the Bell Group, the Laughing Cow brand group, cheese making company, one of the leading company in the cheese market. And I tell them about these ideas, and they say, okay, we are trying to develop a social business unit. Please come and develop it within this social business unit. And for the first time of my life, I became an employee with this mandate to develop a new business model within the big business model. And that was 4 incredible years where I developed from scratch this idea that street vendors could be amazing distribution agents. And we started that by trying to understand how it works, and we came up with this idea that in order to sell very low margin products, because FMCG usually, at least the product that we were selling, has very low markup compared to the markup that street vendors are benefiting from with fruit and vegetables. So we said there's another way to engage them, which is not based on financial incentives, but based also on social incentives. And we created this idea of trying to, in cooperation, in co-creation with other companies and other NGOs, trying to bring them the service that will really change their lives: microinsurance, vocational training, capacity building, access to banking services, etc. A whole platform of service that they can have access to in exchange of their commitment to sell the product. And this model has been a great success in terms of business, because it represents, in terms of volume, 20% of the business of Bell in the countries where we have settled the model. It's more than 10,000 street vendors that are engaged right now. And in terms of impact, it's very strong as well, because one street vendors that enter the program nearly multiply by 2 its revenue, not because they sell a lot of Bell product, but because they sell better also the other products, thanks to the capacity building training. And on top of it, when you ask street vendors how do they, if they feel that they are entrepreneur, more than 60% of them after 6 months say, of course, I'm a businesswoman, where they were 0 at the beginning of the program. So it's really about empowering. I've done that for 4 years. Then my daughter born, and I was traveling a lot, so I decided to resign. And there is one organization that followed me during all this journey. This organization is Ashoka, by the way. And Ashoka, actually, when I was working in Tibet and developing this model, and I met with them in Paris, and they said, you know what you are doing? It's called social entrepreneurship. And actually, you're not alone. There's plenty of social entrepreneurs. And there is an ecosystem, and you can be connected to this ecosystem, and you can share. And I felt very isolated at that time. So it was really an opportunity. Ashoka was not in China, and it's still not, I think. But it was very great for me to see that what I was trying to do And I didn't put any word on it at that time. I didn't know about social entrepreneurship or social business, but it gave me an identity, and it gave me also friends. It gave me a connection with people who were actually doing things amazingly better than me, actually. And it was very good to have that. And then after, when I was at Bern, and I met with them again, and they said, you know what you're doing? It's called social entrepreneurship. And it's also, there's a whole ecosystem and a lot of people who are doing it. And again, it gave me an identity and it connected me to some friends, and I became part of the Ashoka network. And so when I decided to resign, I came to Ashoka friends, and I said, I'm sorry, because I won't be able to sustain my position. I resign, and you took a lot of time to select me, but I will go. I will do something else. And they said, oh, it's perfect. Let's come. France needs a country rep, needs a leader. You're going to do it. And I did that for 3 years, amazing 3 years. But it's not what I do now for a living. Now after having supported and helped social entrepreneurs to grow their model and to scale, and I get a lot inspired by that. I realized that I was still an entrepreneur as well, and I decided to create a new to launch a new adventure, which is called Good Point, and which basically leverage on this idea of social incentives that I've created for Bell, for the street vendors, and to say actually every actors in the value chain who is working with a big corporate, with a corporate, can be committed thanks to social incentives. And the idea is really to engage our clients, which are mainly corporates, to better commit, to better engage the micro entrepreneur within their value chain, farmers, waste pickers, pop and mom stores, street vendors, transporter from the informal sectors in emerging markets, and engaging thanks to social benefit-based loyalty plan, and to measure performance, social performance on the micro entrepreneur and business performance for our client, who are, thanks to social incentive, have strong lever to engage communities. So this is what I do now, on top of being a consultant in the archipel that you presented, and other activities on top of that. So this is sorry, in a big nutshell, my journey.
Well, this is great, John Mark, and it's really interesting to me how you've come full circle. You sort of worked in the past. You worked in this lane of social entrepreneurship. You worked in a different lane of social entrepreneurship, and now with Good Point, you sort of connecting those two pieces, which is really interesting. Can you speak a little bit about some of the obstacles that you faced as you developed your social enterprise, and how did you address the challenges that you face, and how successful were you?
So I faced actually different kind of obstacles when I was a social entrepreneur and when I was a social entrepreneur, which are quite different. As a social entrepreneur, I will say specifically in the context, in the political context that I was working on or working in, and knowing the extreme tension that exists in the ecosystem that I was working on. I think our main challenge was, of course, the entourage. We were coming from abroad, and we had to convince local authorities, business partner, corporate, that what we're doing was the right thing, that what we are doing made sense, and to convince them to work with them as partner, as facilitators, as clients. And I think, of course, it's a challenge that every entrepreneur meets in his journey, and specifically at the beginning. And I think the way we have addressed this legitimacy challenge was really to focus on field and understanding very clearly what were the challenges, the social challenges, the environmental challenges, issues, in order to then develop a solution, then develop a theory of but it really started from there. And it's true or in Africa, different African countries for the street vendors. It started by a diagnosis, by a strong understanding of what was the needs of people, their aspiration, how it works. And then we started to have to gain legitimacy, because when we were talking, we were really talking not about big idea, big vision, but very ground things that we observe, insights that we observe. And we spend a lot of time trying to understand that through qualitative, quantitative research, through interviews, trying to understand. And it's a time that's in the corporate world that I actually the one that I have work with. It's something that you don't necessarily do a lot because you don't have time to do it. And also you don't have the mindset to do it by yourself. You have a mindset which bring you to delegate this very important work to agencies. And when we started, and it's a chance, within Bell, we started with very few money. So we didn't have enough money. I didn't have enough money to ask for a third party, an inside organization to do the focus group, the interviews. So I did everything by myself. But this work, deep-rooted work, helped me to gain legitimacy, to know what I was talking about, and to really design a solution that makes completely sense. I think this is really one thing that, after, of course, as an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur, one of the main challenges I have encountered is access to financing. Because our project was highly risky, and also, but we raised money, we raised funds, we were able to engage foundations and also impact investment funds, and also traditional funds. The thing is that it's very specific to China, but when you're a foreign-owned company in China, you cannot have access to credit to finance your growth, so you are obliged to increase your capital and bring investors to get enough money to manage your 3-digit growth when you start. And we had this issue that at some point the governance of organization was really at risk. So this is for the first part. And for the second part, I think what was the main obstacle was the company in itself. And I don't say it was an obstacle, I think, but I was somehow with the Street Vendor Project as an entrepreneur, really challenged on the model, but much more challenged that if I was doing something like core business. And because you have different forces, some people are very into it and are happy to play with you and to welcome you to test and learn, and some are very critical. But being critical in a big organization means challenge, because you cannot just say no. It's not in the mindset, but you challenge. And this challenge actually was very helpful, because every time I get challenged, I had to go back on the field and capture the insight and modelize again my solution and put it into the market until it works. So, for example, for the street vendors, just to give you a very concrete example, first of all, we had the logistic or the supply chain or the sales logistic team who said, well, it's great what you want to do, but street vendors are mobile. If they are mobile, we cannot deliver them. And this is our business model. We deliver point of sale. And if we do that with street vendors, we're going to lose a lot of time and energy and money and efficiency. Then we get back to work and we discover that actually the street vendors, they all go in the same markets. You have two or three wholesale markets in big cities. And with only one table between mango and bananas with a pyramid of products, you can reach 10,000, 20, 30,000 people at the same place. So actually it's very cheap. It's much cheaper than the traditional business, which is based on delivery. Then the marketing comes and say, oh, street vendors, they are it's really true actually, but you know, they are dirty. You know, it does not come, it cannot be combined with our brand, which is I'm not targeting this kind of population, and it's not working. And so we came with this idea, and so we started to look at what were the motivation of customers, of consumers to buy from street vendors. And so we followed street vendors in the streets with their, of course, with their agreements. And one street vendor was selling door to door to one woman, and 30 seconds after we knock at the door. Hi, madam. You just buy from your street vendors. How many times do you buy to your street vendors? And she said, no, I never buy to street vendors. They are dirty. I don't want to have anything in common with them. I said, I'm sorry, madam, but you just bought, we just saw you, we're together, you just bought some product, some mango or whatever. And she said, yeah, but it's not the same. She's my friend. I support her for 5 years. I really like her. So it's different. And so I support her. And so what we discovered is that by working with street vendors, we were on top of the impact we had on street vendors, but we were creating a relationship with the consumers, a solidarity. We were bringing a solidarity attribute to the brand that was really valued by the consumers. So every time we had to dig in, understand, and come back with a solution. And at the end, it works. And now Sharing City is an international model that is part of the strategic plan for the coming 10 years for the group. Every country has to consider working with street vendors, and the project is developing thanks to World Bank as well, World Bank investment, IFC and World Bank investment to deliver its social impact. So it's
That's amazing, Jean-Marc. And
examples, but there's plenty of other obstacles.
Yeah, well, you know, you shared a lot about what works, what are some of the challenges, how you overcame those challenges, and that relates very closely to one of the questions we actually have from one of our participants. Since you shared so much about what works, how you overcome challenges, I want to take a question from Roxana Tompia. Um, um, from Romania, and Beatrice Sevis from Mexico, and Maud in France. They all have the same question. In your experience, what are the initial steps or minimal requirements for an entrepreneurial idea to succeed within a company? You talked about how you overcome the challenges, but as you were taking that leap into that space, what were some of what can you share with our participants about some of the minimum requirements to be successful as an entrepreneur?
I will share some very common insights. It's not very innovative. Sorry about that. And I'll try also to give you some empiric answer as well. The way I started this adventure with Intel was possible because the shareholders and the executive committee, the top management, was willing to do that. And it was really strategic for them to explore what was possible to do in the field of social business. I did not, a lot of entrepreneurs have to convince the top management that it is a good thing to do, and spend a lot of energy, time, and political intelligence to make the boat move from few degrees in order to create a space for entrepreneurship. This is not the case for me. I arrived in the company when this decision was already taken. So I cannot talk about anything else than commitment from the top to start with. Then I think that what bears have achieved to do is to create this space. It means this in this organization, a kind of hybrid tool, hybrid mechanism, where you had some people who were direct with entrepreneurial mindset coming from outside the company and inside the company, who, with a budget, of course, and with a mandate, 100% of our time, full time dedicated to make it happen. And a small team, a kind of SWAT task force team that was directly reporting to the executive committee. So it's a kind of hybrid something innovation. You plenty of different examples of how those kind of organization exist or can exist within a corporate organization. But I think it's very important that people who are working in it are dedicated. And after, what is important also is to have time, to have the mandate, but to have time, to manage expectation. Coming up with an idea or model that perform in terms of business and of social impact is 2 times more complex than just business. And it requires other kind of mindset that what we are used to develop in the traditional business sector. It requires to understand social issue, and it takes time, and this time is absolutely necessary. So you need an organization. I'm talking a lot about helicopter view about organization, but it's an organization that understands that and give some time, of course not years, but some time where you just learn. It's a learning curve, it's a learning journey. So it needs to be a learning journey, at least for the 2 first years where you are innovating, testing, etc. After 2 years, then it's another story. Then you have your minimum viable product. Sharing cities, we had already one country it was working. We started with 0 street vendors. It started to grow. We are at 1,000 street vendors. Then we can say it started to be a success. Then the other question is the scale, how you scale it. My big mistake when I was developing sharing cities, and this mistake has been, of course, and hopefully resolved by my successors, is that I was working in silo. I was developing my stuff, and because I had this mandate where I did not really have to report to any other person than the executive committee, I had this kind of natural behavior just to do the things and make it happen, and focusing a lot on my project. And I did not spend enough time to really engage around me the people that would be the facilitators for scaling. Because as soon as you have one pilot that you have done, it's working, it's documented. You can really show evidence that it's working in terms of business and impact. Now, how are you going to scale it? Then you need to engage around you. And I didn't spend enough time to do that. So I probably lost a lot of time because I did not make the effort from the very beginning to engage. And it's a pity because it's very easy to engage with a very innovative social impact program. Everybody wants to be part of it, for real. A lot of people in the company are really interested about what you can do. So it was probably my mistake. And I lost a lot of time to not for having done that. After to make it work, what I used to say, I don't want to be too much in the buzz things that you can hear everywhere, but this is really my experience. When people say, "But did you fail?" and I say, "But I failed." I mean, the success that I've reached with Sharing City is actually a succession of failure. I failed many times, and this is how I built the final project solution that still is not perfect, but start to deliver. So I think this mindset of test and learn, not building big strategies where on the paper, on the PowerPoint, it's beautiful, but actually it's not tested. It looks good, but try to test on the field very quickly and develop some pilot systems and perimeter which give you the opportunity to learn. because this is really how you are going to build your model. Or at least this is my experience. I don't want to say strategy is not necessary, but I'm not at all a strategic person. So that's why this is the way I've done it, actually. I do strategy, but after, just to rationalize and show to people that it was greatly thought, but actually it's really about step by step.
Well, Jean-Marc, that's really useful for our participants to know. And you're really bringing a wealth of knowledge from the perspective of an entrepreneur. So I want to take another question from our participants. And this question relates to organizational culture. So we would like for you to provide a little bit of insight to corporate managers and how to create an entrepreneurial culture within an organization. So this question comes from Rita Golub-Veba. And the question is, in relation to organizational culture, how can companies create an environment that enables employees to develop entrepreneurial behaviors?
It's a very good question. It's not an easy question, and I think that Ashoka is much more equipped to answer the question than me, because there's a lot of program where Ashoka is trying to support this transformation within companies. And to impact the culture, or at least to move the culture in order to be able to welcome this kind of innovations or this kind of spirit. I think, first of all, what I would say is, and here it's not really, it's probably a little bit theoretical, or not actually, but first of all, it's about inspiration. I guess that would be the first phase. It's, I think that you can really get idea. I mean, entrepreneurship sometimes starts with an idea, and after you have the way you are going to develop it, but it starts with an idea. And none of the idea that I had actually was coming from my head, my brain. I think it's a mix of many things that I've seen, and I have articulate to come up with something that I've said mine, which actually is not mine for real. For example, the whole idea about what I'm doing today with Good Point and with the social incentives with Bell, actually, this idea of platform of services that you use as a performance lever is something that Ashoka Fellow has developed for years, much before me. In India, and it's and the fellow is Arvind Singh, the founder of the National Association for Street Vendors in India, which is a federation that supports street vendors. 3.5 million street vendors federate, and he already had this idea. I took these ideas and I monetized it, but the ideas came from another party, and I think it's very important to get ideas and also to be convinced by the ideas, just to be confronted to those ideas, to be open up to what is happening outside. And it's true that social innovators from Ashoka or outside Ashoka are some animals that are very interesting to look at, because they are on top of being inspiring. They inspired me a lot, but on top of it, I think they have this capacity to really capture insights from clients, to create trust, because they develop ideas that can create trust on the market, and can scale it and make it or change the norm or engage other partners to do it. So I think it's a very interesting. Same as the digital entrepreneur, social entrepreneurs are very interesting to look at, to be inspired with new ideas. Of course, those ideas are not 100%. You cannot just take it and develop it within an organization. The acquisition needs some people to make it suitable with the culture, with the values, and with the reality of the business of the corporate that an entrepreneur would live. And he will make it a product that will be at the same time contributing to the business growth and with social impact. But this only an entrepreneur can do it. I don't believe too much in the joint venture. I've tried so many times to develop it, and it never works because it's too complex to have a common vision. But I believe a lot in inspiration, innovation process to capture. This is the idea. And then there is the skills. On the skills, unfortunately, I cannot give you a lot of insights because what I can give you is probably one reflection. I'm always surprised, but probably for some of you, it won't be very nice to hear. But I'm very surprised to see that in many companies, when it comes to innovate, when it comes to disrupt or to develop a social business, companies try to do internally with people who are here for a very long time in the organization. Then you have head of the social business unit or an entrepreneur, social entrepreneur program. It's very it's always questioning me. And Bell did things completely differently. Bell said, we have no idea how we are going to lead it. And actually, we have tried, and it did not work. We need to find some people who have a different mindset. And that's how they proposed me to join. But when I think about it, somehow they were crazy to do that. I was coming from the Tibetan High Plateau, doing some scarves and fabric for Hermes with Yakul, and they said, come, and you will innovate our business model with street vendors. And I think that was really something interesting, the way they integrated some people who are entrepreneurs and giving them the space so that they can express their potential. And Bell has been very good at doing that. So that's just a reflection to say that to really succeed, sometimes you also need to recruit some people with different mindsets and create teams where those people are going to inspire others, engage others, and create the condition for the spirit to be spread within the company. Just a food for thought, and I never tested it really in an organization, so it has absolutely no value. As I was saying, I did not try it, did not test it, did not learn from it, but it's just a thought. It's a key factor of success for Bell, actually.
Thank you
Bell
so much.
says there are two key factors of success. First, we recruit people who knew how to lead projects. And second, we don't give them any money so that they are obliged to do it frugal. So that's the two insights for real that Bell has.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, John Mark. And we have about 15 minutes left. So we really value this insight. So we're going to try to squeeze as much out of you in this last 15 minutes as possible. So what I'm going to cover how are we going to frame this? We're going to take a few more questions from our participants, and then we're going to ask you to provide some parting advice to our participants and helping them to, really glean the most practical methods of creating impacts within their organizations. So I'm going to we have about 3 questions from the participants that I'm going to try to ask you at one time because they're related. And these questions have to do with organizational culture in the context of different cultures across different countries. So let me let me frame it a little bit more precisely here. So we have questions from Kate Martin, who's based in England, Tommaso Manon, also Francois Darnier from France. And what they're asking is, given your broad international experience, could you share how you've seen social entrepreneurship vary for different countries? And additionally, how do they vary? How does the entrepreneurial culture vary across corporations? Right. So the question has to do with what are some of the differences you've seen across different cultural contexts on a macro level in different countries, and what are some of the differences you've seen across different companies um, in their entrepreneurial cultures, if that makes sense.
Yes, it's not an easy. The second one is not an easy question. The first one was not easy as well. The second one particularly not easy. The cultural differences exist, of course, and I worked in many different contexts. Nevertheless, I don't have the broad map of in the different dynamic. But what I can see is in terms of engaging communities, being able to create a citizen engagement that would influence public policies, the corporate world, but really this capacity to create large amount and to leverage large amount of energy and create very broad communities of actors, which I think is one of the most powerful model in terms of social entrepreneurship. India and Africa are definitely, for me, the models. And when I want to be inspired, I look at in those two geographies because this is really where I've seen some leaders who were able to in order to find solution linked to low public services or difficulty to access to public services, or difficulty to create the legal framework to really engage people or actually include people. Definitely India, Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa are really interesting to look at. And it's also a lot about frugal innovation, which are particularly favored. Not very complex, no technologies, no very complex articulation, but very complex operation in order to have to develop those very large community who can be client, who can be actors, who can be influencers. So I think it's very interesting. Facebook is actually working on very interesting program to, and with Archipel & Co, we are supporting Facebook to develop that, where their vision is to say the next social entrepreneur is the community leader. And you have some communities in the world that engage more than millions of people that have been developed by individuals and who are now able to generate very strong social impact. Just give you one example, but the Farmers Club, African Farmers Club, is a Kenyan farmer, isolated with a computer. He created his group. Now it's 2 million followers all around the world in emerging countries, where they share, farmers share best practices about how they seed, about how it's 2 million community, people community. It's huge in terms of impact. It's amazing. And the guy is very simple. It's just behind his computer and he organizes it with a lot of true spirit, I would say. So the idea of Facebook is how do you help this individual who already created this huge network to become a social leader. So that, just one insight that I felt interesting. I think that European, and I don't know much about America, so I don't want to talk about European are in very complex legal frameworks that where the social challenges are different. But what I field is that they are much more into co-creation. What they try to do is at the frontier with co-creation and collective intelligence is how do you change systems by collaborating with other actors, because the complexity of the problems that we have in let's say developing economies, or where you have a very strong social central government that delivers a lot of social services already, and who can be also part of the problem. It's very complex and requires a lot of collaboration within different actors at different levels in the society, from the corporate world, the public sector, the citizens, the social entrepreneurs, the civil society, etc. So I think they're very good at organizing all those forces to come up with a solution. It's few insight. Huh? I don't say it's. Don't take it like a theory. I will never tell that to my necessarily to in the school saying this is a truth, but this is a gut feeling. After, the second question was about
The differences you've seen in entrepreneurial cultures within
yeah.
corporations.
This one is quite complex because, of course, every organization has its own culture and its own way to operate. Probably it's in operation that you see a lot of differences. There's organizations that historically are very hands-on, and their business model is really about making things. And naturally, the way they are going to lead their social commitment will be hands-on. They will develop their own project from A to Z, put resources on it, and have probably the will to integrate it to their business. Those organizations will not necessarily innovate a lot because they will be probably very concentrate on differentiate their actual know-how offer. It's very pragmatic, while having social impact, of course. And you have organizations that are very used to work with many different actors, agencies, etc., where they will probably be much more in collaboration with other actors. For example, what I see, the bank, for example, the banking sector is pretty much into supporting social entrepreneur ecosystem, eventually create joint venture, but they are probably less into developing their own inclusive model. They would be more actor to support the ecosystem. So it really depends. And of course, the consulting firms will be, of course, because this is their expertise and their reason to be, they will probably be more in supporting the ecosystem. So, but of course, it really, and it's not just about sector, of course, it's also about in each sectors, companies have different culture and they will define their own vehicles. Some will be much more into create the condition too, and some will create a business unit, and it's really family-owned company has have a natural tendency to leverage the value of entrepreneurship, of doing it by yourself, etc. And other companies will be different. So sorry, this answer is not at all a good answer, but it's just
No, I think it's a great answer. I mean, I think in a nutshell, it does really depend on the culture, and it's really imperative that you understand that culture and how to navigate that.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, we have a few minutes left. We have about 5 minutes left. And there's one question that I think is really important. And there's a few more other questions from participants. So the question I think that's really important for any would-be entrepreneur is, can you provide some very practical, straightforward tips on how to get buy-in from leadership? If you have an entrepreneurial idea and you want to present that. How do you make that case, that business case, to the leadership of the corporation?
Um, so I take my entrepreneurial hat and not my consulting hat. For me, the first things that I mean, the first thing that you need to start with as if your ambition as a social entrepreneur is really to have social impact, as an entrepreneur is really to have social impact, is that you will gain your legitimacy again by knowing what you are talking about, by your capacity to be connected to external ecosystems. It's very important that if you say, I want to resolve this problem, your understanding of this problem is really deep, deep depth about the issue, because this is the only way your solution will make sense. What I really like when I hear social innovators or social entrepreneurs, and that I've experienced during three years in Ashoka, is that when they talk to you, they spend 30 minutes talking about the problem. It's quite depressive sometimes, huh? But they are talking about the problem. And because they have completely understand the problem and articulate it, when it comes to the solutions, it takes 1 minute to explain to you the solution. And you are convinced because you understood the whole journey of understanding. And this is exactly the first year of work, how you need to spread your time. 6 months or 8 months on understanding the problems. And after it's a solution that you test and learn and test and learn and that come up with something very relevant. But that would be my main advice.
Perfect sense. Makes perfect sense.
And second advice, I really want to say it before we end the meeting. Sometimes I meet some entrepreneurs. Really, they have an idea. They are in the ecosystem. They work in a corporate, and personally they are very engaged. They're connected. They deep dive, but they never do the last mile, which is to press the button of your last floor level of your office and to come up and say, I want to meet with the CEO because I have an idea and I think it can change the company. And sometimes they're scared about just presenting their idea. What do you risk by doing that? Just enter the CEO office and says, I need 5 minutes or 10 minutes. Give me that. Worst things that can happen to you, you will think you're an entrepreneur. So don't hesitate if you are obsessed like I was or like I can be, if you really feel this is what you want to do and needs to do, and that if you don't do that, you'll be disappointed or sad. Just take, courage, go for it, and present your good idea. Be good if you do that.
Very good, John Mark.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And in this world of social impact, social entrepreneurs are the ones that we always hear about, right? What is one social entrepreneur that really inspires you that our participants can learn from?
I would say Arvind Singh is a very good friend. So that's why and also I think what he has done with street vending is absolutely amazing. Street vending is now written in the Constitution of India. The right for any people to sell things on the street and to occupy the street is now legal in India. It's an amazing example of how someone who started with a very small organization is able to reach millions of people and change the lives of millions of people by combining social innovation, business models, and policy making. It's a great one.
Excellent.
Social Entrepreneur of the Year 2015, I think.
This is a social entrepreneur or entrepreneur?
Entrepreneur.
Okay.
You asked for entrepreneur?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, you asked for entrepreneur. I would say, what is his name? He's a good friend. just give me 1 second. Arnaud Hébert from Vinci.
Nice.
He has really, he's a co-creator from Ashoka, same promotion than me. And he has been able to create a whole inclusive recruitment agency in the building sectors, engaging more than 3,000 people every year. Is amazing.
Thank you so much, John Mark. That
Sure.
question was from Alan Barber, who's based in Italy, by the way. And our final question comes from Shusana, who's based in the US. And this question is, I think, is really germane to the period we're living in. Her question is, how do you stay resilient in these uncertain times? And do you have any tips to keep teams motivated?
What else can you do? I don't have tips. I just, my point of view is whatever is the scenario that people can sell to you about the world of tomorrow. The only things, the only bets that I do, and the only thing that I truly believe in is that none of the future that all this organization can give you can be or happy ending with technologies resolving everything. Nothing of that is possible if you don't do everything you can do to include the 4 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid who have access to barely nothing. And a world where 50 people have the wealth of more than 4 billion people does not make sense anymore, and does not make sense at all. So the only bet that I do, and what I try to do, very small scale, of course, compared to the problem, is trying to engage this BOP to be empowered and to be ready to build a brighter future. Otherwise, nothing is possible. So that's why I don't really. It does not change my. I still have exactly the same direction that I have before. COVID has not changed anything to my motivation. It's just probably an accelerator or not. I don't know. And even if we struggle for the coming years, because we're going to live very difficult times, probably. In any case, there's no future without inclusion.
Thank you so much, John Mark. This was very inspiring. I know I'm very
Thank you, Mark.
inspired to continue this great work of supporting social entrepreneurship and creating change in the world. We're a few minutes over, so we're not going to hold you up. Thank you again so much. I've learned so much from you, and I'm sure
Thank you, Mark.
others have as well. The last sort of thing I would like for you to share is how can folks connect with the work that you do? How can they support you and the impact you seek to create?
No, I'd be happy to share my good point story, and if I can send you so that you can share it with all the participants, the content. Don't hesitate. Add me on LinkedIn. Take my phone number. I think you can, Mark, send everything to the participant. And if you want to have just discussion and have a mirror effect with me, or if I can be of any help, I'd be happy to do it. This is what I do. So it would be a real pleasure. And this is how I inspire. I get inspired as well. So it's, don't hesitate, do it, and I'll be happy to follow the discussions.
Thank you so much, Jean-Marc. And with that being said, this is the conclusion of the first webinar for this course. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing the great impact you'll create in the world.